The fire alarm was the least of my problems. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Water cascaded from the ceiling sprinklers, soaking the opening night crowd at the Meridian Gallery. Designer dresses wilted, $1,000 suits darkened with spreading stains. Someone screamed about their suede loafers. The gallery owner, Patricia Whitmore, stood frozen in horror as streams of water poured over 27 pieces of contemporary art, including my husband Marcus's prized installation, a 7-foot sculpture of twisted chrome that had taken him 9 months to complete. I should have been panicking. Instead, I watched the chaos with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what's about to happen. Because I'd triggered the alarm myself 3 minutes ago, using the cigarette lighter I'd borrowed from the coat check. "Everyone out! Please evacuate calmly." Patricia's assistant was herding the dripping patrons toward the exits, his voice cracking with stress. Marcus stood in the center of the gallery, water streaming down his face, staring at his ruined sculpture as rivulets of dirty water pooled around his Italian leather shoes. His mouth hung open, his carefully styled hair plastered to his forehead. For once in his life, my husband was speechless. I should explain. This wasn't supposed to be how tonight ended. This wasn't the plan at all. 4 hours earlier, I'd stood in our bathroom staring at my reflection in the mirror while Marcus shouted from the bedroom, "Olivia! We need to leave in 20 minutes. Are you even dressed?" I was dressed. I'd been ready for an hour. But I'd learned over the course of our 6-year marriage that Marcus needed to feel like he was orchestrating everything, including my schedule. So I waited, counting down the minutes, applying another coat of mascara I didn't need. "The Whitmore opening is the most important night of my career," he continued, his voice muffled through the door. "Every serious collector in the city will be there. I can't have you showing up looking like you just rolled out of bed." I smoothed down the black dress I'd spent 2 weeks finding. Simple, elegant, expensive enough to pass. Marcus's scrutiny, but not so eye-catching that I'd draw attention away from him. That was the key to surviving as Marcus Webb's wife. Be present but invisible. Supportive but silent, decorative but never distracting. "I'm ready," I called back, opening the door. Marcus looked up from adjusting his tie, his eyes scanning me with the critical assessment he usually reserved for art critiques. "The dress is fine. Lose the earrings. They're too much." The earrings were simple gold studs, barely noticeable. But I reached up and removed them without argument, setting them on the dresser next to my grandmother's jewelry box. Pick your battles, I'd learned. Save your energy for the wars that matter. "Better," Marcus said, though he was already looking past me, checking his phone. Patricia texted, "The early crowd is already arriving. We need to make an entrance, not slink in with the stragglers." The drive to the gallery took 40 minutes through downtown Seattle traffic. Marcus spent most of it on his phone, alternating between checking Instagram and texting with his agent, David. I watched the city lights blur past my window and thought about the canvas I'd been working on for the past 3 months. Hidden in the storage unit I rented under my maiden name, 27 feet long, 9 feet high, 543 hours of work spread across 18 weeks of stolen time. Every Tuesday and Thursday when Marcus thought I was at yoga. Every Saturday morning when he slept in after his late studio sessions. Every Sunday afternoon when he met with collectors and told me my presence would be distracting. The painting was called Dissolution. It was the best work I'd ever done. It was also the last thing I'd ever create under the name Olivia Webb. "Remember," Marcus said as we pulled up to the gallery, jarring me from my thoughts. "Tonight is about supporting my work. Patricia is introducing me to Reginald Castellan, the one who bought that Rothko last year for $8 million. If he likes my installation, we're looking at representation in New York. Real representation, not these small-time Seattle galleries." "I know," I said quietly. "You've told me." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Well, I'm telling you again because you have this habit of zoning out during important conversations. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Try to stay engaged tonight. Smile, be charming, but don't monopolize anyone's time. These people are here for serious art, not small talk. We stepped out of the car into the October chill. The Meridian Gallery occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in Pioneer Square, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the crowd already gathering, a sea of black clothing and dramatic eyewear, wine glasses catching the light. Marcus straightened his jacket and placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that might have looked affectionate to anyone watching. But I felt the pressure of his fingers, the subtle push that said, "Remember your place." The gallery was more packed than I'd expected. Patricia Whitmore had clearly called in every favor and contact she had. I recognized several faces from the Seattle art scene, critics who could make or break a career with a single review, collectors whose casual purchases exceeded most people's annual salaries, and other artists, some established, others still clawing their way toward recognition. Marcus's installation dominated the center of the space. The chrome sculpture caught and fractured the light, creating shifting patterns on the white walls. It was technically impressive, I could admit that. Marcus had always been skilled at execution. But there was something hollow about it, something that spoke more of ambition than actual passion. It was art designed to impress rather than move. "Marcus, darling!" Patricia materialized from the crowd, air-kissing both his cheeks. She was in her 50s, reed thin, wearing architectural black clothing and enough silver jewelry to set off metal detectors. The response has been overwhelming. Simply overwhelming. Everyone is talking about convergence. "Patricia, you've outdone yourself." Marcus's voice shifted into what I privately called his gallery tone, slightly British, impossibly pretentious. The space, the lighting, the curation, it's exactly what the piece needed. "Oh, we do try." Patricia's eyes flicked to me for half a second before returning to Marcus. "Olivia, you look lovely. There's wine at the bar if you'd like something." Translation: "Please go occupy yourself somewhere else while the important people talk." I smiled and nodded, drifting toward the periphery of the room. This was the routine. Marcus would work the crowd, and I would orbit at a safe distance, available if needed for a quick introduction. "This is my wife, Olivia," but otherwise invisible. I accepted a glass of red wine from the bar and began a slow circuit of the gallery, studying the other pieces on display. Patricia had curated a group show around the theme of modern metallics. Besides Marcus's sculpture, there were several abstract paintings incorporating gold leaf, a series of photographs printed on aluminum, and a few smaller installations using copper wire and steel. And there, in the far back corner of the gallery, nearly hidden behind a structural column, were 3 small canvases. My heart stuttered. I'd submitted them 3 months ago, back when Patricia had put out an open call for the show. I'd used my maiden name, Olivia Morrison, and a separate email account Marcus didn't know about. I hadn't told him I was submitting. I hadn't told him about the months of work, or the gallery fee I'd paid from my slowly dwindling savings account. I certainly hadn't expected Patricia to actually accept them. The pieces were modest in size, each about 2 feet square. They were part of a series I called Fracture Points, abstract explorations of the moment before something breaks completely. Layers of oil paint built up and scraped away, revealing the history of each mark, each decision. They weren't flashy. They wouldn't dominate a room the way Marcus's sculpture did. But they were honest in a way I hadn't been honest about anything else in years. I moved closer, studying them as if they were someone else's work. In this context, surrounded by metal and shine, they looked almost fragile, vulnerable. The gallery lighting wasn't doing them any favors either. Too harsh, washing out some of the subtler color transitions I'd worked so hard to achieve. Interesting pieces, aren't they? I turned to find a woman in her 60s standing beside me, examining the paintings with genuine attention. She wore a flowing purple dress and statement glasses with thick red frames. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, Everything about her screamed, serious collector with serious money. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. They're subtle. Subtle, the woman repeated, smiling slightly. That's one word for them. I might say they're the only things in this room with any actual emotional depth, but I suppose subtle works too. I felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. You really think so? Oh, absolutely. Don't misunderstand. Marcus Webb's sculpture is technically brilliant. Very impressive craftsmanship. But it's all surface, isn't it? Like a beautiful person with nothing interesting to say. She leaned closer to one of my paintings, studying the texture. These are saying something real. Something complicated. I painted them, I heard myself say, then immediately regretted it. What was I doing? Marcus could walk over at any moment. The woman's eyebrows rose. Did you? Well, congratulations. They're quite good. I'm Catherine Reeves, by the way. She extended her hand. I shook it, my mind racing. Catherine Reeves. The Catherine Reeves. One of the most influential private collectors on the West Coast. Her collection had been featured in ART News. Major museums borrowed pieces from her for special exhibitions. Olivia Morrison, I said, using my maiden name automatically. Morrison, Catherine repeated thoughtfully. I don't think I've seen your work before. Are you local? Yes, Olivia. Marcus's voice cut across the gallery like a blade. He was striding toward us, his face arranged in what someone who didn't know him well might mistake for a pleasant smile. But I knew that particular tightness around his eyes. He was angry. There you are, he said, reaching us. His hand found my elbow, fingers pressing just a bit too hard. I've been looking everywhere for you. I was just admiring the art, I said carefully. How thoughtful. His attention shifted to Catherine, and I watched his demeanor transform completely. I don't believe we've been introduced. Marcus Webb. This is my wife, Olivia. Wife, not Morrison. Webb. I saw the moment Catherine made the connection, her eyes moving from Marcus to me and back again. Catherine Reeves, she said, shaking his hand. We were just discussing these paintings. Your wife has excellent taste. She painted them, actually, Marcus said and laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Olivia's little hobby, she dabbles. Dabbles. The word hit me like a slap. I felt my face burn. I see, Catherine said slowly. Her expression had cooled considerably. How supportive of you to acknowledge her work. Marcus either didn't notice or didn't care about the edge in her voice. Oh, I'm all for creative outlets. Everyone needs something to keep them busy, right? Though between you and me, he lowered, his voice in a conspiratorial way that somehow managed to carry across the immediate area. I keep telling her she should maybe stick to photography or ceramics. Something more. Forgiving. The floor felt like it was tilting under my feet. He was doing this. Here, now, in front of Catherine Reeves. Painting requires a certain level of technical skill, Marcus continued, warming to his subject. It's not something you can just pick up and expect to master. He gestured vaguely at my work. They're sweet attempts, but let's be honest. They're not professional quality, more like expensive therapy. Catherine's face had gone completely still. Is that so? Don't get me wrong, I support Olivia's interests completely. But there's a difference between a hobby and actual art. These pieces are fine for a community center show or maybe a coffee shop, but in a serious gallery like Patricia's? He laughed again. I actually tried to get Patricia to remove them when I saw them earlier. It's a bit embarrassing, honestly. Like someone hung their kindergartner's finger paintings next to actual artwork. Something inside me fractured. Not broke, fractured. There's a difference. When something breaks, it's sudden and complete. When something fractures, there's a moment where it's still holding together, where all the pressure and stress becomes visible in those fine lines spreading through the surface. You can see exactly where and how it's going to fail. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to use the restroom." I walked away before either of them could respond, my legs somehow still functioning despite the numbness spreading through my body. I didn't go to the restroom. Instead, I walked straight to the coat check, handed the attendant my ticket, and retrieved my purse. Inside the purse was my phone, my wallet, and the small silver lighter I'd found on the sidewalk outside the gallery when we arrived. I'd picked it up without thinking, planning to turn it into the coat check as lost and found. Now I stood in the gallery's service hallway, staring at that lighter in my palm. Expensive therapy. Kindergarten finger paintings. I thought about the 6 years I'd spent making myself smaller, quieter, less. I thought about the paintings I'd destroyed because Marcus said they were derivative or amateurish. I thought about the art classes I'd stopped taking because he'd complained about the cost. I thought about every time I'd hidden my work, lied about my time, pretended that my dreams were just silly little hobbies to keep me occupied while he built his real career. I thought about dissolution, the massive canvas locked away in a storage unit, the painting that represented every ounce of skill and passion and truth I had left. And I thought about Marcus, out in that gallery right now, probably still talking to Catherine Reeves, completely unaware that he'd just committed career suicide. Because here's what Marcus didn't know. Catherine Reeves wasn't just a collector. She was also the primary benefactor of the Castellan Museum of Contemporary Art, one of the most prestigious institutions on the West Coast. And Reginald Castellan, the collector Marcus was so desperate to impress? Catherine's ex-husband. They'd remained close friends and business partners after their divorce. Catherine had even helped fund Reginald's acquisitions for his private collection. When she spoke, he listened. I didn't know all of this because I was particularly well-connected, or because I moved in those circles. I knew it because 3 months ago, when I'd submitted my paintings to Patricia's open call, I'd done my research. I'd read every article about the Meridian Gallery, every review, every piece of gossip I could find. I'd learned who Patricia's major supporters were, who attended her openings, who had the real power in the Seattle art world. I'd been preparing for this moment long before I realized what I was preparing for. The lighter felt warm in my hand. The gallery's fire suppression system was state-of-the-art. I'd noticed the sprinkler heads during my research, the smoke detectors placed every 20 feet. All it would take was a small flame held near one detector for about 30 seconds. The system would flood the entire gallery. No one would be hurt. The art would likely survive, though perhaps with some water damage. But the opening would be ruined. Marcus's perfect night, his chance to impress the collectors, his moment to shine. All of it would dissolve into chaos and confusion and insurance claims. Was I really going to do this? I walked down the hallway toward the back storage area, where Patricia kept supplies and shipping materials. The smoke detector here was old, older than the ones in the main gallery, more sensitive. My hands were steady as I flicked the lighter. The flame caught on the first try. I held it up toward the detector and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 27, 28, 29, 30. The alarm shrieked to life, and a heartbeat later, water began pouring from the ceiling. And now here we were. The gallery evacuated, the opening ruined, and Marcus standing in the center of the room looking like someone had just told him his entire career was actually an elaborate practical joke. I stood near the exit, water dripping from my hair, my black dress clinging uncomfortably to my skin. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt terrible. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. What the hell happened? Patricia was shrieking at the building manager, who'd appeared with a massive keyring. The system just went off. There's no fire! Must be a malfunction, the manager said, looking harassed. I'll have to call the fire department. Get them to check it out before we can shut off the water. Marcus finally moved, sloshing through the puddles toward me. His face was pale except for 2 spots of bright color high on his cheeks. This is a disaster, he said. His voice was hollow. A complete disaster. Castellan was supposed to be here in 20 minutes. I'm sorry, I said, and was surprised to find I almost meant it. Not sorry about the fire alarm, but sorry that it had come to this. Sorry that 6 years of marriage had led me to this moment, standing in a flooded gallery, watching my husband's dreams literally wash away. Patricia's never going to forgive me, Marcus continued, not really talking to me. She'll think somehow this is my fault, that I'm cursed or something. And if word gets out that the opening was a disaster. He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Artists were superstitious. Collectors were worse. A ruined opening night could be seen as a bad omen. Marcus's reputation, still fragile, still being built, could collapse under the weight of tonight's chaos. Maybe it won't be that bad, I offered, still playing the role of supportive wife even as I felt the fracture lines spreading through that identity, preparing for the final break. Marcus looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second I thought I saw something like recognition in his eyes, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Then Patricia appeared, water streaming from her hair, her silver jewelry tarnished and dripping. Everyone's evacuated, she said. The fire department is on the way. Marcus, I'm so sorry. We'll have to reschedule, obviously. I'll call everyone, explain what happened. What about the art? Marcus asked. My installation. Probably fine, Patricia said, though she didn't sound convinced. The sculpture should survive water damage. Some of the paintings? She glanced toward the back corner where my pieces had hung. Well, we'll assess everything once the water stops. My paintings. In the chaos, I'd almost forgotten about them. I pulled away from Marcus and waded through the ankle-deep water toward the back of the gallery. Patricia called after me, but I ignored her. The 3 canvases had been knocked off the wall by the force of the water. They lay face down in a spreading pool, the frames already warping. I crouched down and carefully turned them over. The paint was running. 6 months of work, dissolving into abstract streaks of color that bore no resemblance to the careful compositions I'd created. The oil paint, not fully cured, mixed with the water to create murky puddles around each piece. They were ruined. Completely, utterly ruined. I should have been devastated. These were good paintings, the best work I'd done. They'd been my chance to finally have something of mine in a real gallery, to see my work hanging next to other artists, to be taken seriously. Instead, I found myself laughing. It started as a chuckle, then built into genuine laughter that echoed strangely in the water-damaged gallery. Because of course they were ruined, of course. It was so perfectly, awfully appropriate that I couldn't help but laugh. Olivia? Marcus's voice came from somewhere behind me. What are you doing? I stood up, still holding one of the destroyed canvases. Water dripped from it in irregular streams, the paint sliding down in slow-motion defeat. Looking at my expensive therapy, I said, and laughed harder. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe sanity was something I'd been gradually losing over the past 6 years, and I was only now noticing the absence. Come on, he said, reaching for my arm. Let's get out of here. You're in shock or something? I pulled away from his touch. Did you mean it? Mean what? What you said to Catherine Reeves. About my paintings being finger paintings. About them being embarrassing. Marcus's jaw tightened. Olivia, this isn't the time. Did you mean it? I repeated. He looked at me, then at the ruined canvas in my hands, then back at me. I was trying to be honest, he said finally. You asked me to always be honest with you about your work. I asked you to be constructive. I was being constructive. Not everyone is meant to be a professional artist, Olivia. It's not an insult, it's just reality. You're good at a lot of things. You're organized, you're supportive, you're a great hostess. But painting, he shrugged. It's just not your strength. The fracture lines spread further, deeper. I see, I said quietly. Look, I know you're upset. But once you calm down, you'll realize I'm right. And honestly, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. He gestured at the destroyed canvases. Now you don't have to pretend anymore. You can focus on things you're actually good at. Like managing the house or planning events or supporting your career, I finished. Exactly. He looked relieved that I seemed to be understanding. See, that's what I love about you, Olivia. You're reasonable. Once you get past the initial emotional reaction, you always see sense. I set the ruined canvas down carefully in the water. Marcus, yeah? I want a divorce. The words came out calm, clear, certain. Marcus blinked. What? I want a divorce, I repeated. I'm going to stay at my mother's tonight. We can discuss the details this week. You're joking. I'm not. Olivia, you're being ridiculous. You're upset about the paintings and the fire alarm and… Look, maybe I was a bit harsh earlier, but you can't just throw away 6 years of marriage because of one bad night. I'm not throwing it away because of one bad night, I said. I'm throwing it away because of 6 years of bad nights. Because I've spent half a decade making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. Because you just called my work expensive therapy in front of one of the most important collectors on the West Coast. Because… My voice cracked slightly. Because I set off that fire alarm, Marcus. That stopped him. What? I triggered it, deliberately. I stood in the back hallway and held a lighter up to the smoke detector until the alarm went off. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally anger. You what? I ruined your opening. I destroyed your perfect night. And I'd do it again. You're insane, he said, his voice rising. You're actually insane. Do you have any idea what you've done? To my career? To Patricia's gallery? To… Yes, I said simply. I do. And I don't care. Patricia appeared then, drawn by Marcus's raised voice. Is everything okay? My wife just confessed to committing arson, Marcus said. It wasn't arson, I corrected. There was no fire. Just water damage. Patricia's eyes widened. You set off the alarm? Deliberately? Yes. Why? I looked at Marcus, at his expensive suit and his carefully styled hair, and his handsome face twisted with anger. Then I looked at Patricia, at her water-damaged gallery and her ruined opening night. Because, I said, I needed to see what would happen if everything fell apart. And then I walked out. The October night was cold and wet, and I was soaked through, but I kept walking. Away from the gallery, away from Marcus, away from 6 years of being Olivia Webb, the supportive wife, the patient audience, the woman who dabbled in expensive therapy. My phone buzzed in my purse. Marcus calling. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. On the 4th call, I finally answered. Olivia, get back here right now, Marcus said. We need to talk about this. No, what do you mean, no? I mean no, Marcus. I'm not coming back. Not tonight. Not ever. You're being childish. This is just because you're upset about the paintings. Once you calm down, I'm perfectly calm, I said. And I was calmer than I'd been in years. I'm going to my mother's. My lawyer will contact you next week. Your lawyer? Olivia, you don't have a lawyer. I will by Monday. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I powered it off and dropped it back in my purse. I was 3 blocks from the gallery when a voice called out behind me. Miss Morrison? I turned to find Catherine Reeves standing under a streetlight, her purple dress dark with water, her statement glasses slightly askew. Mrs. Reeves, I said, surprised. I thought you'd left. I did. Then I came back. She walked closer, studying me with those sharp eyes. You set off the alarm. It wasn't a question. I considered lying, but I was too tired. Yes. Why? I'm not sure you'd understand. Try me. So I told her. Not everything. Not the 6 years of slowly shrinking. Not the destroyed paintings or the hidden storage unit, or the dreams I'd learned to fold up small enough to fit in corners Marcus wouldn't notice. But I told her enough. When I finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Your husband is a fool, she said finally. I'm starting to realize that. Those paintings of yours. The ones that got destroyed. Did you have photographs? Yes, on my phone. Good. I want you to send them to me. She pulled out her business card, expensive cardstock that somehow hadn't been damaged by the water. And I want you to come to my house tomorrow afternoon. 3 o'clock. Don't be late. I stared at the card. Why? Because, Catherine said, I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation about your career. I don't have a career. I have a hobby. Expensive therapy. You had a hobby, Catherine corrected. Past tense. If you come to my house tomorrow, we're going to discuss your actual career. The one you're about to start. She walked away before I could respond, her purple dress disappearing into the Seattle night. I stood there, holding her business card, water dripping from my hair. My marriage dissolved, my paintings destroyed, my entire life fractured into something unrecognizable. And for the first time in 6 years, I smiled. My mother didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door at 11:30 that night, soaked and shivering. She just wrapped me in a towel, made chamomile tea, and pointed me toward the guest room that still had posters from my high school years on the walls. You'll tell me when you're ready, she said, squeezing my hand. I told her everything at 2 a.m. Sitting at her kitchen table while rain hammered against the windows, she listened without interrupting, her face cycling through concern, anger, and finally something that looked like relief. I never liked him, she said when I finished. I know I'm not supposed to say that now, but it's true. He always made you dimmer somehow. Like he was afraid of what would happen if you shined too bright. I let him, I said. I made myself smaller. You survived, my mother corrected. There's a difference between making yourself smaller and learning to survive in a small space. You did what you needed to do. Now you're doing something different. I slept until noon the next day, a deep, dreamless sleep that left me feeling hollowed out but strangely clean, like a house after a thorough clearing. When I woke, my phone was still off. I left it that way. At 2:30, I stood in front of my mother's bathroom mirror, trying to decide what one wears to meet with one of the most influential art collectors on the West Coast. The clothes I'd brought from the house were limited: jeans, a sweater, boots. Nothing remotely appropriate for the kind of mansion I assumed Catherine Reeves lived in. Wear what makes you comfortable, my mother called through the door. If she's worth your time, she won't care what you're wearing. So I wore the jeans and sweater, pulled my hair into a simple ponytail, and left my face bare except for mascara. I looked like myself. Not Marcus's wife. Not the carefully curated version I'd been performing for 6 years. Just Olivia Morrison, 32 years old, recently separated, standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite name yet. Catherine Reeves's address led me to a neighborhood I'd only driven through once or twice. Queen Anne Hill, where the houses had names instead of just numbers, and the view of Puget Sound was worth more than most people's retirement funds. Her home was a restored Victorian painted in deep blues and grays, with a tower room and stained glass windows that caught the afternoon light. I parked my 10-year-old Honda Civic between a Tesla and a vintage Mercedes and tried not to feel intimidated. Catherine answered the door herself, wearing paint-splattered overalls and no shoes. Her red-framed glasses were pushed up on her head, and there was a smudge of what looked like charcoal on her left cheek. "You're early," she said, smiling. "I like that. Come in." The house was not what I expected. Instead of the sterile, museum-like interior I'd imagined, it was warm and cluttered and alive. Art covered every wall, not just framed pieces but sketches tacked up with pushpins, small sculptures balanced on bookshelves, works in progress leaning against furniture. The living room had been converted into a studio, with an easel by the window and a work table covered in tubes of paint and brushes soaking in mason jars. "You paint," I said. "Surprised? I do a lot of things," Catherine said. "Collecting is just the thing I'm known for. Tea, coffee? Something stronger? Tea would be great." I followed her into a kitchen that looked like it had been transported from a French farmhouse. Copper pots hanging from hooks, herbs growing in clay pots on the windowsill, a massive wooden table scarred with decades of use. Catherine put the kettle on and gestured for me to sit. "So," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Tell me about dissolution," I blinked. "How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know things. After you left last night, I did some research. Found your storage unit rental under Morrison. Found the Instagram account you think is private. Found 3 years' worth of work you've been hiding. She leaned forward. Why are you hiding it, Olivia? The kettle whistled. Catherine got up to make the tea, giving me time to gather my thoughts. Because Marcus said it wasn't good enough, I said finally. Because every time I showed him something, he found ways to tear it down. Because I started to believe him. And now? Now I don't know what I believe. Catherine set a mug in front of me, Earl Grey with a slice of lemon. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. Your husband is technically proficient. He can execute a vision cleanly and precisely. But there's no soul in his work. It's empty calories, looks impressive, satisfies nothing. Your work, on the other hand, has something real in it, something that matters. You saw 3 small paintings for maybe 5 minutes before they were destroyed. I saw enough. Catherine pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. After our conversation last night, I went home and looked you up. Found your undergraduate portfolio from the University of Washington. Found a series you did 7 years ago called Before the Fall. Those pieces were remarkable, Olivia. What happened? I met Marcus. Ah. Catherine set down her phone. Let me guess. He was supportive at first, encouraging. Then slowly, piece by piece, he started picking apart your confidence. Suggesting you try different styles. Pointing out flaws. Comparing you unfavorably to other artists. Until eventually you stopped making work altogether or started hiding it away where he couldn't criticize it. How did you... Because I've seen it 100 times. Talented people, usually women but not always, who get involved with someone who feels threatened by their gifts. And the thing is, it's not always malicious. Sometimes people genuinely believe they're being helpful. They think they're protecting you from failure or disappointment. But the result is the same. You disappear. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I disappeared. You survived, Catherine corrected, echoing my mother's words. And now you're coming back. That's why you're here. I'm here because you told me to come. No. You're here because some part of you knew last night that setting off that fire alarm wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at her garden. I want to see dissolution. Today, if possible, my heart jumped. It's not finished. I don't care. It's huge. 27 feet long. I don't even know how I'm going to move it when I... Olivia. Catherine turned to face me. Stop making excuses and take me to see your painting. The storage unit was in a facility near the airport, anonymous and industrial. I'd rented it 18 months ago using money from my grandmother's inheritance, the only funds Marcus didn't have access to. Unit 347 was climate-controlled and cost more per month than seemed reasonable, but I'd needed somewhere safe. Catherine followed me down the fluorescent-lit hallway without comment. When I unlocked the unit and rolled up the door, she stood silent for a long moment, just looking. Dissolution filled the back wall, mounted on a frame I'd built myself from lumber and prayer. It was abstract, but not entirely. You could see figures in the swirls of paint if you looked long enough, human shapes dissolving into color and light. The palette was mostly blues and grays and deep purples, with occasional bursts of gold that caught the light like promises. I'd worked on it in sections, unable to see the whole piece at once in this space, trusting that the individual parts would cohere into something larger. How long have you been working on this? Catherine asked quietly. 18 months. 543 hours. And Marcus doesn't know it exists. No. Catherine walked closer, studying the brushwork, the layering, the places where I'd scraped back to reveal earlier decisions. She didn't speak for so long that I started to get nervous. This is the real thing, she said finally. This is what I've been looking for. Looking for? I'm opening a gallery, Catherine said, still studying the painting. Not a commercial space. I'm too old for that nonsense. But a private gallery attached to my home, invitation only, featuring artists I believe in. Artists who have something genuine to say. I've been looking for an inaugural exhibition, something that would set the tone for everything that follows. She turned to face me. I want it to be this. My throat went dry. You want to show dissolution? I want to show everything. This piece is the centerpiece, surrounded by whatever else you've been hiding away in here. She gestured at the other canvases leaning against the walls, the sketches and portfolios, the smaller works I'd created over the past 3 years. I want to give you a solo show, Olivia. A proper one. The kind that makes critics pay attention. I can't afford. There's no fee. This is what I do. I find artists I believe in, and I give them a platform. In exchange, I get first right of purchase on anything you create for the next 3 years. She named a figure that made my head spin. That would be the advance against future purchases. Enough to live on while you work. Enough to divorce your husband and start fresh. I sat down on the concrete floor because my legs weren't working properly. Why? Because your husband called your work shit in front of me and I don't like bullies. Because this painting is extraordinary. Because I'm 72 years old and I've spent my entire life accumulating art. And the thing that gives me the most joy now is helping real talent get recognized. She crouched down to my level. Also because Reginald, my ex-husband, the collector Marcus was so desperate to impress, owes me a favor. And I'm going to call it in by making sure he comes to your opening and sees exactly what Marcus dismissed as expensive therapy. When? My voice came out as a whisper. 3 months. That gives me time to prepare the gallery space and send out invitations to everyone who matters. It gives you time to finish this piece and create 2 or 3 more to round out the show. Can you do that, could I? 3 months of doing nothing but painting. 3 months of not hiding, not apologizing, not making myself smaller. 3 months of just being the artist I'd been before I learned to doubt myself. Yes, I said. I can do that, Catherine smiled. Good. Now let's talk about the practical matters. You'll need a lawyer for the divorce. I know someone excellent. You'll need a new studio space. I have an apartment above my garage that's sitting empty. You'll need materials, which I'll cover up front against your advance. And you'll need to decide on a name. A name? For the exhibition. The title matters. It sets the tone, tells people what to expect. She looked at Dissolution again. What does this painting mean to you? What are you really trying to say? I thought about the 18 months I'd spent on this canvas. The Tuesday and Thursday mornings stolen from a life that wasn't really mine. The careful lies and hidden receipts. The feeling of standing in this storage unit with a brush in my hand, watching colors mix and blend and become something that felt true in a way nothing else in my life felt true. It's about what happens when you finally let yourself come apart, I said slowly. When you stop holding everything together and allow yourself to dissolve into what you're really meant to be. Perfect, Catherine said. So we'll call it Dissolution New Works by Olivia Morrison. You're reclaiming your maiden name, I assume? Yes, smart woman. We spent another hour in the storage unit. Catherine photographing my work with her phone, making notes about framing and presentation, talking about lighting and wall placement with the casual expertise of someone who'd been doing this for decades. By the time we left, the sun was setting, and I felt like I'd been awake for a month. One more thing, Catherine said as we stood by our cars. Your husband is going to make this difficult. Men like him don't let go easily, especially when they realize what they've lost. You need to be prepared for that. I know. Do you? Because he's going to tell you you're being rash, that you're throwing away your marriage over hurt feelings. He's going to promise to be more supportive, to take your art seriously. He's going to try to make you doubt yourself again. He can try, I said. But I set off a fire alarm and destroyed his opening night. I think we're past the point of reconciliation, Catherine laughed, sharp and bright. I think I'm going to enjoy working with you. I turned on my phone on the drive back to my mother's house. 37 missed calls, 23 voicemails, 46 text messages. Most from Marcus, a few from Patricia, several from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read the texts. Instead, I called the lawyer whose number Catherine had given me and left a message about scheduling a consultation. Then I called the storage facility and arranged to have Dissolution professionally moved to Catherine's gallery the following week. Then I sat in my mother's driveway and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally letting myself want something without apologizing for it. Marcus showed up at my mother's house 3 days later. I watched from the upstairs window as he knocked on the door, waited, knocked again. My mother answered, spoke to him briefly, then closed the door in his face. She came upstairs. He says he needs to talk to you. That you're making a mistake. What did you tell him? That you'd talk to him when you were ready, which is code for never, but he doesn't need to know that. Marcus called 17 more times that day. On the 18th call, I finally answered. Olivia, thank God, I've been going crazy. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. Of course there is. You can't just walk away from 6 years of marriage because of one argument. Because I was honest about your paintings. You called my work expensive therapy. You said it belonged in a coffee shop. You humiliated me in front of Catherine Reeves. I was trying to protect you. Do you have any idea how cruel the art world can be? I didn't want you to get hurt by putting yourself out there when you're not ready. When would I be ready, Marcus? When would I be good enough? Silence on the other end of the line. I thought so, I said. The answer is never. Because if I got good enough, that would threaten you. That's not fair. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce. Don't come to my mother's house again. I hung up. He texted, I love you. Then, we can work through this. Then, you're overreacting. Then, fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when your little art fantasy falls apart. I blocked his number. The next 3 months were the hardest and most exhilarating of my life. I moved into Catherine's garage apartment, a bright, spacious loft with north-facing windows and enough room to work on multiple pieces at once. Catherine had it outfitted with professional-grade lighting and a ventilation system that made my storage unit setup look like amateur hour. I painted. Every day for hours that stretched into each other until I lost track of time. I finished Dissolution, adding final details that brought the piece into sharp focus. I created 3 new large-scale works and half a dozen smaller pieces. I rediscovered what my hands could do when I wasn't second-guessing every brushstroke. Catherine visited every few days, sometimes just watching me work in silence, other times offering observations that were sharp and astute without being dismissive. She introduced me to other artists in her circle, a sculptor who worked in reclaimed wood, a photographer who captured urban decay, a performance artist whose work made me rethink everything I thought I knew about space and audience. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to something larger than myself. The divorce papers arrived in December. Marcus had contested everything, the house, the savings, even my car. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Teresa who took no prisoners, handled it all with calm efficiency. He's posturing, she told me during one particularly frustrating conference call. He knows he doesn't have a leg to stand on. You kept your finances mostly separate, and the house was purchased before the marriage. He's just trying to drag this out. Why? Because he can't control you anymore, and it's making him desperate. The exhibition opening was scheduled for the first Saturday in February. Catherine had sent invitations to everyone who mattered in the Pacific Northwest art scene, plus a few major players from New York and Los Angeles. Reginald Castellan had confirmed his attendance, so had 3 important critics and 2 museum curators I recognized from my research. Also on the list, Patricia Whitmore and, surprisingly, Marcus. You invited my husband? I asked Catherine when I saw his name. I invited your soon-to-be ex-husband, she corrected, because he needs to see what he dismissed. And because there's nothing more satisfying than proving someone spectacularly wrong. The morning of the opening, I stood in Catherine's gallery, a beautifully renovated space attached to her home through a glassed-in walkway, and looked at my work hung on proper walls with proper lighting for the first time. Dissolution dominated the main wall, even larger and more imposing than I'd remembered. The new pieces flanked it, creating a conversation about transformation and identity, and the courage it takes to let yourself fall apart so you can rebuild into something true. Nervous? Catherine appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. Terrified. Good. That means it matters. She handed me a cup. Listen, I should tell you something. Reginald called yesterday. He's bringing a client, someone looking to make a major acquisition for a private collection. How major? The kind of major that changes careers. My hands started shaking. Catherine steadied the coffee cup before I could spill it. "Don't think about that right now," she said. "Just focus on what you've created. The rest will happen or it won't, but the work is what matters. The work is always what matters." The opening started at 7. By 6:30, I was changed into the dress Catherine had insisted on buying me. Deep blue silk that made me feel like myself, not like someone playing dress-up. My hair was down. My makeup was minimal. I looked like an artist, not a wife. The first guests arrived fashionably late, and within an hour the gallery was full. I recognized faces from magazines and art blogs, people whose opinions could make or break careers. They circulated through the space, studying the paintings, making notes on their phones, engaging in the kind of intense discussions that meant they were really seeing the work. Catherine had advised me to let the paintings speak for themselves, so I stayed near the back of the gallery, watching and listening. "The brushwork is extraordinary," I heard someone say. "Where has she been?" "I've never heard of Olivia Morrison. The color palette is devastating. Look at how she builds tension in the negative space." Marcus arrived at 8:15. I saw him the moment he walked through the door, saw him take in the crowd, the gallery, the paintings on the walls, saw his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then something that might have been anger. He found me in the corner where I'd been hiding. "So this is what you've been doing," he said. His voice was tight. "Planning this behind my back." "I wasn't planning anything behind your back. I was just painting. In secret. In a storage unit. For 18 months. Because you made it clear my work wasn't welcome in our home. That's not—" He stopped, looking at Dissolution again. "Is that the painting you were working on when we met?" "No. That's the painting I was working on while we were married." Understanding dawned on his face. All those Tuesdays and Thursdays, the yoga classes, were lies. Yes. You lied to me for 18 months. You called my work shit in front of Catherine Reeves. I said calmly, "I think we're even." Reginald Castellan chose that moment to approach. He was in his 70s, distinguished in a way that suggested old money and older taste. The woman with him was younger, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and sharper jewelry. "Ms. Morrison?" Reginald extended his hand. "Reginald Castellan. This is my client, Diana Hartfield. We've been studying your work for the past hour." I shook both their hands, acutely aware of Marcus standing beside me, his presence like a storm cloud. "It's extraordinary," Diana said. "Catherine sent us preview images, but they didn't do justice to the scale or the technique. Dissolution particularly, there's something almost architectural about how you've constructed the composition." "Thank you," I managed. "Diana is building a collection focused on contemporary artists exploring themes of transformation and identity," Reginald explained. "Your work fits perfectly with her vision." "I'd like to purchase Dissolution," Diana said directly. "If it's available." My heart stopped. "It is. Excellent. I'm prepared to offer $340,000. The world tilted. $340,000. For a painting Marcus had never seen, that I'd created in secret, that represented every ounce of courage I'd managed to scrape together over 18 months of hiding and lying, and finally believing in myself. That's— I couldn't finish the sentence. "More than fair," Catherine said, appearing at my elbow. She must have been listening. "Olivia, might I suggest you and Diana discuss the details in private? Reginald, would you like to see the other pieces?" She smoothly extracted Diana and Reginald, leaving me standing with Marcus, who looked like someone had just explained mathematics to him in a language he didn't speak. $340,000, he repeated. "For one painting?" "Yes. That's more than my sculpture sold for." "Your sculpture sold?" I was genuinely surprised. "For $45,000. To a tech executive who probably won't even display it properly." He looked at Dissolution again, really looked at it this time. "I never knew you could paint like this. You never asked. I thought—" He stopped, started again. "I thought I was protecting you. From failure. From disappointment." You were protecting yourself, I said quietly, from having a wife who was more successful than you. Marcus flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest, Marcus. If I'd been creating work like this 6 years ago, would you have married me? Or would it have threatened you too much? He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. I need to go talk to Diana, I said. You should leave. Olivia. Goodbye, Marcus. I walked away. He didn't follow. Diana Hartfield was everything Marcus had pretended to be. Genuinely passionate about art, knowledgeable, without being pretentious, excited about discovery rather than acquisition. We talked for 30 minutes about process and inspiration and the technical challenges of working at that scale. She wrote me a check on the spot. $340,000, made out to Olivia Morrison. I'll arrange transport, she said, and I'd like to stay in touch. I'm always looking for new pieces, and your work is exactly what I've been searching for. By the time the opening ended at 11, I'd sold 3 more paintings. The total sales for the night exceeded $500,000. Critics had taken photos and made notes. Museum curators had asked about future work. 2 galleries from New York had expressed interest in representation. Catherine found me sitting on the floor of the now empty gallery, staring at the red dots marking sold pieces. How are you feeling? She asked, sitting down beside me. I don't know, I said honestly. Like I'm dreaming, like I'm going to wake up and none of this will have been real. It's real. She squeezed my hand. This is what happens when you stop hiding your light. When you let yourself be seen. Thank you, I said, for believing in me, for giving me this chance. I didn't give you anything, Olivia. This was always yours. You just needed permission to claim it. Marcus sent one final text message that night. After the opening, after the sales, after everything had changed. I'm sorry. I was wrong about your work, about you. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. 6 months after that, I had my first solo show in New York. A year after the fire alarm, I was featured in Art News with a 2-page spread showing dissolution in Diana Hartfield's private collection. The article called me an artist of extraordinary emotional depth who emerged seemingly from nowhere. I laughed when I read that. Not from nowhere. From a storage unit near the Seattle airport. From Tuesday and Thursday mornings. From the small, hidden spaces I'd carved out of a life that was too small to hold me. From the moment I stopped being Marcus Webb's wife and started being myself again. I kept one thing from my marriage, the lighter I'd used to set off the fire alarm. I keep it on my studio desk now, next to my brushes. A reminder that sometimes, the only way to begin is to burn everything down and start fresh. Marcus calls occasionally, always late at night, always after he's been drinking. I never answer. There's nothing left to say to him, nothing that would matter to either of us. Catherine became my mentor, then my friend, then the closest thing to family I have outside my mother. She was there when I bought my first real studio. She was there when the Castellan Museum acquired one of my pieces for their permanent collection. She's there now, every time I doubt myself or wonder if I'm good enough. You're better than good enough, she always says. You're the real thing. Now stop asking for permission and get back to work. So I work. I paint. I create pieces that scare me with their honesty, their rawness, their refusal to be anything other than exactly what they are. And sometimes, late at night in my studio, I think about that fire alarm. About standing in a hallway with a lighter in my hand, making the choice to destroy something beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Best decision I ever made. The thing about dissolution is this. It looks like an ending. Like everything falling. A part breaking down, losing its shape and structure and sense. But really, it's a transformation. a necessary destruction that clears the way for something new. You have to be willing to let yourself come undone, to release your grip on who you thought you were supposed to be, before you can become who you actually are. Marcus called my paintings shit. I sold one for $340,000. But that's not really what this story is about. It's about the moment you realize that someone else's opinion of you, even someone you love, even someone you've built a life with, doesn't have to be your truth. It's about choosing yourself. Even when it's terrifying, it's about lighting the match and watching everything burn. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.